welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is December 14th, 2023, and this is episode 853 of this fine podcast. I'm joined today by, I don't know, fine's probably, yeah, fine's fair. I'll say it's fine. I'm joined today by Mr. John Lindemann.
It's great to be here, James, and hopefully my audio is much better this week.
I compared it to like a PA speaker in an old store. Like, not like a Lowe's where they've replaced the speakers over the years. Like one where they've been using the same PA speaker since the 80s.
Yeah.
It was like, what the fuck? What is happening? That episode was saved by Mr. Guillaume Veillette.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here, and I also hope that John's audio is much better this week.
I can't say anything, because I screwed up my audio, like, what, about a month ago?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, I can't make any jokes about this one. I can just make jokes about how it sounded, not by the act of doing it.
Yeah, I think I had my recording level too high, but I'm never really too sure how things are going to come across in Audacity, so...
Yeah, like, it would be nice if we had better tools.
Yeah.
Like a better recording tool, a better communication tool, because we're using Skype, and we are at the whims of its updates and what evil it beset upon us. Something that we can consult with a recent expert on this, Mr. Greg Leahy.
Ahoy, hoy, everyone. I would only say I would joke about John's audio, but I think you're going to have to file that under the category of tempting fate, so I won't.
See, that part, like... We're going to get blown up by this thing, whether we want it to or not.
Yeah,
like,
that's probably a healthy philosophy to have. I don't disagree, but still, it just feels wrong.
We've never, like, I would guess probably about 2 months is probably the longest we've gone without something just absolutely snake biting us. So we were due. It is what it is, you know? It's not like one of those situations like one of the ones where I just recorded on the wrong mic. And it's like, I have a very easy test for the mic. I just tap the mic. And I can see the waveform. I don't even have to do a stop. Okay, let me stop it and listen. Because in Audacity, if you stop and listen, it might change the mic back to the one that you were testing to make sure you weren't on in the interim, which means you're now back on the mic you just tested to make sure you weren't on it, which means your test didn't help you. Because I've had that happen before too, and that's fucking miserable. So, yeah. If you got through last week's episode, congrats. We appreciate you sticking through it. And the Guillaume's text to me about I might just have to cut him out, and me thinking about the intro of that show, I'd be like, what if he just cuts it so it's just me talking to no one? That would be very weird.
It's sort of like no context Garfield. That sort of thing?
Yeah, a little bit.
Or no context John, or whatever it is.
I'd be hardcore John Arbuckling it over here, yeah.
James just having an existential crisis, being very lonely, just changes the tone completely.
But the thing is, like, you guys were reacting to it, so it'd be even weirder. It would be like you guys are watching a one-man show and having live commentary on it.
Well, I'm a catalyst, James. I'm a firebrand, you know? It's what I do on this show. I can't even say that with a straight face.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't be able to. Shouldn't be allowed to say it at all, to be honest, but we're here. We're going to do some new business, and I haven't done new business in a really long time. And this is a function of my work and some personal stuff, and I literally, and I'm not even joking about this, I didn't play video games for like 3.5 weeks. And I don't mean like, I didn't spend much time with kids. I mean, period. I didn't touch them. Didn't have time. It's been nightmarish. But the sky has cleared. I can see my time off for the remainder of the year will start in 17 hours. So I had a little bit of time today, and I wanted to have something for the show. So I went ahead and got the newest of new business, which is Kangaroo from the Arcade Archives. We joked about this on this show, and I have been memed into buying the bad game. So,
but it was presented to us as being a pretty decent Donkey Kong clone, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's not.
Oh.
It sucks ass. So here's the thing about Kangaroo, and it's not. All right, so the basic gist is it's a little bit more like Donkey Kong Jr. Like, yeah, the baby kangaroos have been kidnapped by monkeys, and they're in a cage at the top of the screen. You have to climb up there and get them. There's a lot less levels and a lot less space than in Donkey Kong. Like the floors themselves are quite short, and there's less of them. There's more platforming stuff though, like where in the original Donkey Kong, you don't really have to jump that much. Donkey Kong 2, there is some jumping, but like it still isn't a ton of it. There's usually, I think the second stage of Donkey Kong has one mandatory jump, maybe two. And that might be it in terms of like absolutely positively mandatory jumping in Donkey Kong. Actually, I think the stage that's not in the NES version might have a mandatory jump. There's a lot of jumping in this, and there's a lot of fall any distance and you die bullshit going on. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of like, yeah, your foot landed on the platform, but really you needed most of their second foot to land on the platform for the jump to count. So you fell through it, and you died also as well. But there's no gorilla at the top of the screen throwing shit at you. There are a bunch of monkeys running around the stage, climbing up and down the side of the stage and stepping off on one of the platforms, and up above, throwing or dropping, depending on what they are, apples at you. So they might be throwing apples from the distance. They might be throwing these apples that bounce up and down as they come at you. They might be throwing apples at your feet. They might be dropping apples from above. And if any of them hit you, you are KO'd instantly. Why Kangaroo can't take an apple falling and hitting it in the head from, 10 feet above? No idea. The problem is that the apples being thrown at you can be thrown high or low, or they can bounce. So they're going from high to low. And like, I can't figure out how to dodge high to low. I can duck under the ones that are high. I can jump over the ones that are low. Jumping feels bad because it's mapped to the up button, which makes it feel indistinct on the Switch controller. And if you want to jump while going forward, you have to do forward and up, which with a joystick was probably fine, but on the Switch controller is not great. And yeah, like if they're bouncing, you can't jump over them. You can't go under them. You're just going to get hit, bro. You got to get out the way. And if there's nowhere to go, that's a real shame. Sorry, you're going to get hit. So you can defend yourself to some degree besides dodging by punching the monkeys, which means you have to get right up next to them while they're throwing apples at you and punch them. And that can be really tough to clear the distance because the kangaroo, despite kangaroos are actually fairly fast animals, is very slow. So, in most cases, if the monkey decides to throw, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to get hit. You're going to lose.
Now, this kangaroo is wearing boxing gloves, is he not?
It is, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
He is.
Is there any boxing?
You do punch the monkeys.
Okay. All right.
The other issue, though, is that there are monkeys that they said they go up and down the side on this tree. If they don't step out onto a platform, you can't punch them, or you can't reach them. But they can throw apples from on the tree, so they can attack you from a place you can't hit them, which is very bad feeling. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. So yeah, I really struggled to get past the third stage. Like, there's no continues either. So like, you lose your lives and you start back over at stage 1. I don't know how many stages there are. Maybe 4, if I had to guess. But stage 3, I never got past it. So I don't know. Maybe the game ends after stage 3. Who can say? 3 would make sense because three kangaroos were stolen at the start of the game. 3 baby kangaroos. But yeah, I think Donkey Kong's not exactly the most fluid game in the world, but there is some degree of fluidity. There is no degree of fluidity in this game. It is stiff and slow and just generally unenjoyable. So I would say, yeah, not the game for you. Not the game for you if you're big on Donkey Kong clones. This isn't it. Like, I could see why somebody might think this is a good one. but that's really more of a statement about how many bad ones there are.
Who created this? Who was the developer?
Oh shoot, I had it in front of me. Hold on 1 second.
Was it XANADU or something?
I'm not sure. Kangaroo. Here we go. It was Sun Electronics.
Really?
Which is that Sunsoft? It is Sunsoft. Yes. So this is a Sunsoft game. It's bad. It's real bad. It's real no good.
Yeah.
No good, very unpleasant. Like, I had my choice of all the Arcade Archive games. And I said, we talked about this one on the show. I should get this one. And don't do that. If we talk about a game on the show, just don't get it. Like, just don't get it. I don't care what we say about it.
All right, so it was published by Atari. Okay. Interesting. Developed by Sun Electronics, published by Atari, probably depending on region.
Yeah, there's a 5200 port, so that might be the one in question there.
Yeah, because I do remember this from back in the day. Not as a particularly good game, but I do remember it. That's why I thought it was by a notable publisher, well, developer at the time. I didn't know the difference, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just not good. Like that's the funny thing is that like we say this about a lot of the stuff that comes out in Arcade Archive. There's a lot of just like why?
Yeah. There's 4 levels, by the way.
I guess right. I feel good about that. I could have gotten the Tecmo Bowl for arcade, which I didn't even know was a thing. I bet it's good. I bet it's real good. I should just gotten that.
Yeah,
Why didn't I get that, John?
Yeah, I don't know. You've chosen poorly. If I was to quote Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade.
I could have got Pac Pal, whatever that is. I don't know. I don't even know what that is. I'd love to find out.
It's probably better than this.
I could have gotten a different Donkey Kong-ish game, Frisky Tom, which I can't believe is called fucking Frisky Tom.
I was going through like Arcade Archive titles earlier, and I saw something called Naughty Boy. Like, what's up with these titles?
'Cause Japan named them, and they didn't know any better.
I suppose so.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No, I mean, look, the English was a thing. It's not. It's not the same. It's not really there anymore because English is so deeply penetrated. Pun not intended.
Frisky Tom.
Yeah. Well, and the Naughty Boy.
Yep.
But like, I'm looking at Naughty Boy right now, and it is just.
It's just.
I'm looking at Naughty Boy right now. Yeah. No, we did it.
Yeah. Here we are.
Let me write that title down. God damn it. God damn it.
Man.
And I have, like, I'm not even, like, there's some Pitfall in here, maybe, or some Frogger. I don't know what the fuck this game is. But I won't lose to monsters. Burn the castle down. Naughty Boy is an action game released by Jellico in 1982.
Man, they've been around a long time. Wow.
Oh, yeah, they have. Yeah. There's a question mark in the screenshot of Naughty Boy, and I agree. A question mark is the right image to be there. I could have gotten Splatterhouse. I could have gotten Arcade Archives Dino Rex. Dino Rex is it's a fighting game, like a Primal. Was it Primal Rage?
But is it like half? Is it like human body dinosaur heads?
No,
it's actual like what's his name? Ray something Hauser.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Ray Harryhausen. Yeah.
Harryhausen. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, like that type of model of dinosaur, and it's just a crazy game because there are also digitized human actors, quote unquote.
Yes.
And like you can see them like tiny at the feet of the dinosaurs, and they're like whipping them into action and stuff like that. And I saw, like, I watched a playthrough basically on YouTube, and like the most bonkers story about the end of the world, I suppose. And It's I guess that's what I would recommend. Like, I probably you wouldn't have been happier, James, with buying Dino Rex, but I definitely recommend people to go check out a full playthrough.
I might have laughed at least. I could have gotten Circus Charlie. You know, Circus Charlie is a classic, and by that I mean it's fucking Circus Charlie. Jesus Christ. Circus Charlie was one of those, like, if I walked into an arcade that had nothing but old machines and I saw they had Circus Charlie, I went, oh, it's fucking Circus Charlie. Christ. Almost certainly on a bootleg. There was an arcade we went to after an E3 that every arcade machine there was bootleg, and they had Circus Charlie, and I knew I was in for a bad time.
Circus Charlie is always a bad time.
Circus Charlie is not very good, is what I'm going to say. I could have got Gradius. I could have gotten Tank Force. I could have gotten Rygar. Oh, okay. All right. I mean, they're not all improvements. I could have gotten a game that's just called Gun and Frontier. Which, all right, you've got my attention. I could have gotten Versus Castlevania and really felt bad.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what Pac and Pal. There's so many weird fucking Pac-Man variations on here. There's Pac-Land.
Arcade Archives just goes on and on and on. It's to the point now where it's like, we don't need any more of these archives. Thanks. We're good.
No, you've unarchived everything that needs to be unarchived, and then some. But, like, there's Pac-Mania, there's Pac-Land, which is fucking garbage.
Those Pac games are bad.
There's a game called Arcade Archives Pac and Pal. I don't even know what the fuck I'm looking at right now. What? Yeah, so Arcade Archives is a trap. If you're on a podcast and you're like, I need some quick content, I should go look at Arcade Archives. Don't. Just don't.
Yeah.
You're not going to be happy. You're going to find a Pac-Man game that's about cards. And you're going to... Cars? No, cards. With a D at the end. And you're going to think, well, why is that a thing? And I'm going to look at you and go, I don't know. And because I don't. No one does. No one knows why that's a game. Namco needed more Pac-Man games, and they couldn't just make the same Pac-Man game again. They had to go make fucking Pac-Land. Go play Pac-Land. No, I was wrong. Go play Pac-Land. John, you should go play Pac-Land.
I'm good.
I think you'll have
pretty good.
I think you'll have a great time. I think, I mean, you like Smash Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Pac-Land is in Smash Brothers, so it must also be good.
I don't know about that logic.
I think it's sound, and the only way to disprove that logic is for you to go get Pac-Land and play it. Until such time, that logic must hold solid ground. There is a weird, like, sometimes Arcade Archive games come up and you're like, that's a fucking real game? As an example, there's a game that's just called Rompers. I'm looking at the images and have no idea what the fuck I'm looking at. There's a game called 64th Street. It's a fighting game, or it looks like it's a brawler that I've never heard of. That looks bad? Question mark, depending on when this came out, I guess. I don't know. This has been a reminder to you. It's a brawler with giant sprites. We got giant sprite brawler. Oh yeah. Oh, this is it. 64th Street. Guillaume, I found your next brawler. 64th action game released by Jellicoe in 91. Detective. All right. I'm going to emphasize here because they did it. Detective Rick and his partner Alan follow the kidnapping of a company president's
please
daughter.
Don't shout again. Yeah.
And fight many thugs that attack them.
Yep. No, I was looking at the games earlier, and no, I think I'm more likely to get Frisky Tom or what was the other Naughty Boy, or maybe Block Hole or
Block Hole. Yeah. I just passed Block Hole.
Yeah, that's actually classic.
Empire City, which is a light gun game, which is probably not very good to play on a controller, if I had to guess,
or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, true, but definitely diminished as a consequence. But I think my favorite part about the Arcade Archives list is just these aren't real games. Like, you just see the name, you're like, that's not a real game. Like, there's no way somebody made a game called Bells and Whistles. But they did, and it's real. And I'm looking at it.
I mean, we've talked about Wonder Momo so often on this podcast.
Wonder Momo,
like,
yeah.
how can we really be surprised by any game title from back then?
Gotang Gotong.
Yes.
Which is fucking amazing stuff.
Is that like Kurkenton, or is it different?
It's different.
Okay.
I every time I get one of these games for the show, I end up with something fucking weird and not good. And maybe it's me. Like, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe if I just pick different games. Maybe if I just got Athena. Well, Athena's hard as shit. I already own Athena, so that's not the answer. What if I just got Pooyan? Everybody loves Pooyan.
Yeah, Pooyan's not bad.
Arcade Archives Pooyan. I could have got Pooyan.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
I could have got Mr. Goemon, but I didn't. Oh, no, wait, I did. I apparently owned Mr. Goemon. Oh, that's right. That's one of the other Arcade Archive games I did in the past. I went, boy, I made a mistake. So, all right, don't. If you stop the episode after I said Mr. Goemon was there and went and bought it in the interim, that's on you. You should have let me finish my thought. All right, I guess next time it's going to be King in Balloon, which again is a real game. What a product. What a product. All right, John, what have you been up to?
Let's see. So I've been playing a little bit, not a whole lot because I haven't had a lot of time, but I did pick up Ghost Trick a while back, around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and I've been playing that a little bit. Just, I mean, the very opening, but I went into this game cold. I really didn't know much about it at all. Very
20
interesting.
20 years of me yelling at you to play this game.
I know. It's like, play Ghost Trick. Interesting game. So, I've gotten pretty much through the intro, really. The possession, it's funny. They're like, the ghost part and the trick part. I'm like, okay, I see. Switching over to the ghost world, possessing objects. I really didn't realize that this would be a puzzle game. Is it always a puzzle game like this?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good so far. Very tongue-in-cheek. Very much reminds me of stuff that was released around that time period. It just doesn't... Yeah, just the feel of it is very, hey, this is novel gameplay with very tongue-in-cheek dialogue and kind of quirky characters. So I've just gotten through the first part where you resurrect the girl and save her. And just, figure out the, switching back, having, having an item, do something, whatever it can do. The ladder can, extend or something like that. And then you do that and then you flip back over and possess a different object. What surprised me, I guess, is that the timing, because I was like, okay, this is a puzzle game. So it just means I have to, my first impression was that it was almost like an Incredible Machine sort of thing or something like that, where you have to pretty much kind of set up a Rube Goldberg thing or one of those fluid puzzles where you kind of have to figure out the right way and then you kind of click the button and everything just flows through and you're done. Didn't realize that there would be so much of a timing aspect to some of the puzzles where you actually have to navigate hopping from, you have to kind of quickly switch from, going into the ghost mode, possessing this object, kind of coming back out and clicking on it to activate it, and then switching back into ghost mode, swapping over to a different object, and then kind of like for example, one of the first things you do is you have to send a flag up a flagpole, and I had to kind of figure out like, oh, okay, this is actually a timing based puzzle. So I thought that was interesting. I'm sure I don't know what else they layer on top of that, but I didn't expect there to be any sort of action element in this game.
Yeah, timing becomes... It's not always like the most important thing, but timing does become more important as the game rolls on. Like, you do run into more stuff where it's like, hey, you really need... Like, you need to you need to trigger one thing and then move to get to a different location while that animation is playing, so that you can take advantage of it to get to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or, there's a person who you're trying to interact with, and it might be help or might be hinder. But there's a person there, and you're trying to interact with them, and you have to get them while they're moving.
Yeah.
There's a sequence where you're basically just trying to cause distractions for somebody so they can get to another place and not be seen. So you're having to time your actions to cause distractions at the right moment.
And are they moving no matter what?
They stop, and then you and them go, okay, it's time, and then you make your move.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to playing through that. It seems pretty cool. How many levels are there? Because it doesn't take too long to play through, right? It's only about 10 hours, isn't it? Something like that?
Yeah. I don't know how many stages it ends up being.
Yeah.
I think it's like 13 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably about 12, 15, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yep.
I was surprised by how much I remembered on the replay, because it had been a long time. But yeah, it's about what it took me.
Yeah. So that's cool. So I'll be playing through that. Also, Super Mario RPG, of course, I've been playing through. And I loved this game. This is, of course, the game that I played instead of Chrono Trigger, originally, way back in the day. I have no regrets. So, but yeah, I really like what they've done with this. I guess you can call it a remake. But I like it because they didn't change the core of what I think makes that game great, which is sort of the feel of it has almost a silent movie kind of feel, which is very typical of Square Soft at the time, RPGs, where they had kind of a limited toolbox with which to kind of communicate emotions from characters. So you had these really cute sort of interactions, or there's certain things that Mario does, and you see this in stuff of that time period, like Chrono Trigger, like Final Fantasy 3/6, where they're trying to convey emotions and have characters communicate things, like for example, bring another character up to date on what's happened in the story, and they have to act it out using sort of the animations that they have already as a character. And so there's always kind of cute, interactive sort of little things where the character has to communicate things with, motions that they already have, and, with jumping and stuff like that. And of course, I'm really glad, for example, that they kept it that way and they didn't voice every character or something like that. Because really, when you play a game like this and you see the attempts to tell stories like that strictly through the actions of the characters, you really kind of appreciate, man, some games just really don't need voice over everything. It's so overused now. And it's kind of charming to see stories conveyed like this in this game. It's one of the things I probably enjoy the most. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm at the point now, I think, where I've made it through, I think, the first kind of water maze. I forget what town I'm at. I'm not too far into it, but I've been playing it with some regularity. And so I just picked up Geno, actually, is where I'm at. So I'm getting reacquainted with all these characters. I love the characters. They're so great. Just overall, Super Mario RPG is one of my favorite games by far. So I don't know who else has played it here.
Not recently, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Greg talks about it.
This remake.
It's basically one of the things I've done in the last couple of weeks is just wrap up the post-game stuff. So I played it pretty thoroughly. I mean, I did mention sort of, it got through it really fast because, it's very faithful. It has expedited matters with some of the kind of tweaks they've made to the battle system and whatnot. But just how fast everything plays out now. But I mean, also just like kind of sped through it. Like I hadn't even been to like, the Yoster Isle with Yoshi and Boshi and all that, or like done any of the tadpole like musical bits, or like there was some side stuff that I hadn't done just because it was just such a, it was such a like express lane to the finish. I just didn't even do any of that side. But then there's also like the post game, sort of harder bosses as well, which I did, and especially the last one of those, I felt like, all right, I'm glad I did the rest of these to see this last one, because this is actually very cool. And also, you finally stretch the kind of mastery of the battle system with those last ones, because it is very easy for the most part, the run through. So those extra battles do give you something to think about.
Could you ever nail the timing? I'm having a hard time with certain attacks nailing the timing of them. Or with blocking as well.
It's interesting what they do with that, because it's like, as I mentioned when I talked about it, they've emphasized now this whole thing of getting on streaks, right? So it's like, okay, you get rewarded for really getting the timing down so that you continuously kind of get it correct again and again. And I guess the way that they sort of play into that is that if you like haven't got the timing on, so if it's like an attack you haven't seen before, if you haven't been getting it correct, they actually give you an explicit visual indicator rather than just like the noise that plays or the kind of rhythm of the attack. You actually get that yellow, whatever it is, yellow and red, like exclamation point of like, okay, press the button now and you will defend it perfectly, or you will increase damage or whatever. But once you get it right a few times, it takes that away. And they say, okay, well, do it yourself. So basically, like, it's almost never going to let you keep getting it wrong, because you will get that explicit indicator if you get it wrong a few times. But it's going to make you kind of work to keep getting it right. And get those accompanying sort of bonuses and buffs for your party for keep getting it right. So that's the way it tries to sort of balance it out, I guess, is like make it a little bit easier for people to at least sometimes get, the extra damage, the perfect block, but, kind of leave it for people who do kind of really get the timing down on these things to, kind of get the full reward of that. So I think that was kind of a relatively smart, implementation. The net effect is probably just that it makes the game easier than it was before, but I don't have any complaints about that. It was just a really smooth, enjoyable experience.
Yeah, and I don't think it was particularly difficult before either. I mean, I do remember from my original playthrough of it that the final battle against Smithy was very difficult. Very difficult with his multiple phases and all of that, right?
Yeah, so. I remember that taking a while when I played it on Virtual Console, which obviously is just, the way the game was. This time, it didn't seem as difficult. I don't know whether I was, at a different level, or it was just like, the way I'd kind of got the timing down of all these things and just getting these buffs that he didn't really have much of a chance against me anymore. But I don't think there's anything about it these sort of changes they've made that like betrays the spirit of what the game was going for originally or anything. And it probably does make it more accessible and, more enjoyable for a lot of people playing, either people who are, not experienced with this kind of game, or people who are very experienced at this kind of game, but at this stage of their life are not particularly kind of desperate for something to put up too much resistance.
Well, I mean, when it came out, it really was an RPG aimed at children, really. Like, that's kind of what it was. It was a Squaresoft RPG for kids.
And people who hadn't been into RPGs before as well, even if you weren't necessarily like a very small child. I mean, as I mentioned myself, I this would have been kind of my real first RPG. I mean, I'd had Secret of Mana before we bought Super Mario RPG, but that obviously has a more action element to it. This does a little bit with the timed hits, but that actually has more of a kind of real time kind of element to it. So this would have been a kind of important early RPG for me as well, but it didn't work out. Like, we had to send it back. I already talked about that, and so I didn't play it until 2008. But yeah, I think it would have been a really nice beginner RPG, because it was one of these things as well. Even though this came at the very end of the Super Nintendo's life, the fact was that they still probably felt like they hadn't made RPGs as mainstream as they wanted to. Final Fantasy had been is fairly successful on Super Nintendo and stuff. Chrono Trigger was beloved in certain circles, but they probably felt like it hadn't cracked like that real big mainstream success. And of course, that was proven by the fact that Final Fantasy VII did it away from Nintendo.
Exactly.
It's like, it could have been a lot bigger than it was, and then this is eventually but this was like another way of trying as well. We need to broaden the appeal and all that, and I think it's just a shame it didn't come earlier in the Super Nintendo's life. I think it had a better chance to achieve that effect if it wasn't basically right at the moment that Square and Nintendo were going to go on the outs for, whatever it ended up being, 6 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, oh man, I look at it and I'm like, God, I wish Chrono Trigger got this treatment. I really wish Chrono Trigger got this treatment.
Yeah, that would be cool.
The thing is, that game is so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's night and day in terms of, and that's part of what we're talking about with this is the RPG for people who hadn't connected with Square's previous RPGs. It's it's got to be shorter because those people don't want to play. I mean, Chrono Trigger is quite short, but it belies what is ultimately a longer playtime than its runtime.
Yeah.
Whereas, Mario RPG is what it is. What would you say? Lengthwise, what would you guess? About 15, 20?
Yeah, I think 15's probably. I mean, I think it came in under 15 with this playthrough just to see the credits. But like I said, some of that was because I didn't even see some of the non-essential things. So I think 15's probably a pretty. I mean, you could spend longer than that as well if you're really trying to. It's still. I think the odd thing, even having done all the post-game bosses, I don't think I've been to the casino thing that has some useful items or whatever. So even now, I haven't absolutely seen everything in the game. But yeah, it's relatively modest size. Again, as part of trying to stay accessible and all that, so it makes sense. But yeah, obviously, giving Chrono Trigger this kind of treatment is a little more complicated than because like I said that pre-rendered graphic style that they went for is kind of useful in a way because it's now we can just do it real time, so it kind of just looks like the way it was pretending to look before. With something like Chrono Trigger, it's do you keep the pixel art and do a HD 2D thing like they did for Live Alive? Or, do you say, maybe it should just look more like the Toriyama art? It's and be faithful to that. Right. all the stuff that you would have seen, on the box art and the manual and the advertisements at the time. There's a few different ways you could, approach trying to give Chrono Trigger that kind of treatment, but with this, it's just no. I mean, it is the way that game wanted to be, but now it is for real. Like that, I think that's one of the cool things about it.
Yeah,
yeah. So, very pleased with Super Mario RPG and the way it turned out, and the way they really didn't muck with the formula very much, but updated it a little bit to make things a little bit more streamlined. So, that is it. That is it for me.
All right, Guillaume.
Yeah, as I said last week, I just kept on playing the Castlevania Advance Collection, and so I'm up to Area of Sorrow. Well, actually, first, I finished Harmony of Dissonance, the second one of those, and as I... it basically, my opinion about it hasn't really changed since last week. I still find it much, much, much better than Circle of the Moon, but I did remember... there was a reason why I stopped playing it back then, back when, when I first played it in the aughts, because I played it after I played Area of Sorrow, so it just didn't compare favorably to that. But also I remembered that there's one point in the game where it's just not clear where you're supposed to go. There's basically a point in the story where a character tells you, like, well, okay, like, basically time to go to Dracula's throne room or something. And you're like, okay, where the fuck is that? Yeah, it's behind the locked door. Which one? Like, you've been exploring the whole castle so far, 2 versions of a castle. However, it's kind of convoluted, but yeah, anyway, so there are 2, basically, there's a parallel universe castle that you can also explore. So instead of having an upside down castle, you just have basically the same map layout that you go through twice, but you're going to have different enemies and sometimes maybe like different background elements, different different stages. So it's not just completely rehash, but it's a little bit weird. But yeah, like so you're told, like, okay, just it's behind that locked door, but there are several doors all over the place that are locked to you. And it's just not very clear immediately what they're talking about. So eventually I just looked it up and I found it. But I feel like that could have been avoided, this problem, Circle of the Moon, not as good a game, but at the very least, you know where Dracula is from the start. That's where the game starts. You're facing him, or like your mentor is facing him right in the prologue of the game, and then you fall through a hole in the ground. But like exactly on the map where you're going to find him. So this game, Harmony of Dissonance, could have used that. But yeah, outside of that, played pretty well, and it was a lot of fun, actually. But Area of Sorrow, I'm about halfway through, and immediately it's just so much better in so many ways. Circle of the Moon, like, very basic, but it was a release, kind of a release window Game Boy Advance game. It was, like, that's understandable. Harmony of Dissonance, it looked better, but not that much. It kind of seemed to reuse, I think, a lot of the enemies. Like, they were trying to compensate for this whole thing with Circle of the Moon, where people couldn't see what they were doing in that game because the game was using a color palette that was too dark on the original Game Boy Advance that was not lit in any way, not front lit, not backlit. So Harmony of Dissonance compensated for that by having like this bright outline around your character, around every enemy, very kind of almost garish colors for a lot of the castle. Area of Sorrow, it's more even-handed with that. Like, doesn't really, it doesn't look garish, first of all, but also just the backgrounds. Like, Karen actually said, saw me play it, and it was just like, oh, wow, like, she saw me play through Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, Symphony of the Night before that, but, like, the Area of Sorrow, there's a lot of decor elements in those backgrounds, and like, it's actually impressive for especially for the Game Boy Advance. Lots of marble statues and spooky paintings, etc. In the background, and like it's just a looker. And of course, like it plays really well. It's got a whole lot more variety in terms of weapons. And the soul system, where you get powers from the enemies that you kill, it works pretty well. It's a little bit annoying sometimes when you're seeking a specific power and it's just based on luck, on just a dice roll if you're going to get that soul or not. Like, you go in and out of rooms just to try to make the enemy spawn, to keep killing it, to keep trying to, basically you're grinding for an ability that you're going to get randomly. That I guess I could have done without, but anyway, like, still overall, like, it's a really, really good game. I don't know if I would tell someone who's really into this genre into Metroidvanias, like you gotta play Area of Sorrow, because ultimately I feel like this genre has become so big, has so many good games in there, so many kind of recent games. I'm not sure if there is that much of a reason to go back to the Castlevania Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance games, other than if you're nostalgic for them, you want to revisit them, or you have a very, very strong desire to kind of see what those games were like. But ultimately, you can probably find something, better or maybe less conventional. So something that built on what this setup, basically. Anyway, still, it's a good game. I'm enjoying my replay of them. The other game that I've been playing, and this is a game that I had heard about, and I had been ignoring on purpose, not because I thought this is so annoying, why is everyone talking about this game? It looks like garbage. It was kind of the opposite. I thought, people seem to get instantly addicted to this game. This could be trouble. Also, there's a browser version. It's on the Switch, but there's a browser version. Maybe I should stay away. And now, this week, for the next 6 days, so by the time you listen to it, hopefully you can still download the free trial, or you can still stay away from the free trial. There's this game called the Suika game, which people also talk, the watermelon game or melon game.
Which is what translates to.
Yes. So Suika game, it's a very, very simple puzzle game. Not unlike something like Tetris. You've got these items that you can drop from the top of the screen, but it's not timed. Basically, you're not it's not going faster and faster the longer you play it or anything like that. You have complete control over when and where you are dropping this fruit in the kind of the playing area. There are, I think, 13 different types of fruit, each bigger than the previous one. And when you combine two of the same fruit, when you drop two, on top of each other, when they touch the same type of fruit, they combine and they turn into the next biggest fruit. And so you have to keep going like that until you get basically a watermelon. That's how you get the big points. And I still haven't managed that, but apparently getting one watermelon is already tough enough. If you get two, then when they combine, they disappear. You probably make a lot of points, but also they clear the space, so the play area, so you can just keep playing, and it frees up a lot of space, so you're not going to die. The game ends when the fruit reach the top of the play area. Now, what is particular about this game is that, again, it's very simple, but there is gravity. There are physics. There's gravity. There is the game. The fruit push against each other. They kind of can get wedged between each other. They can kind of push out the lighter fruit, I suppose, from where they were. They can roll against each other, and sometimes, basically, the main challenge is that you don't want to stick two small fruit in between what end up being two larger pieces of fruit and just prevent them forever from ever touching each other to combine and get to your watermelon, basically. You want to plan things out so that things will combine, things will disappear. And the strategy that you have to employ, again, I haven't managed to get a watermelon yet, so obviously I'm not very good at this game yet. So maybe there are strategies that I don't understand, but you'll try to combine things in such a way that maybe it's gonna, by combining, they're gonna kind of pop together, they're gonna occupy a little bit more space, they're gonna shoot maybe nudge another piece of fruit just enough so that something else will, end up kind of trickling in between two other fruit and will combine and, save your ass, basically. It's so hard to describe this game. Like you are your worst enemy, basically, in that if you plan things poorly, you're just gonna end up like, okay, like I have these two peaches, and there's so many fruit in between them that they won't ever be able to touch. Why there's so many pieces of fruit between them? It's because like of your kind of ill thought attempts to drop, cherries in there and strawberries in there, hoping that at some point they would kind of just like trickle their way in between the two fruit and combine and save your ass. But like you haven't been, basically planning things through well enough, and now like you kind of you screwed yourself over by just making it impossible for you to win. Anyway, like I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this game, but there's
an insidiousness to it where like little mistakes made early can continue to completely ruin a run forever.
Right. Yeah. Like you think like, okay, like this cherry, I didn't mean for it to bounce in between those two pieces of fruit. That sucks. Maybe I can fix it next time I get a cherry. And then you get it, and then it doesn't do what you expected when it combines into the strawberry, and it's like, okay, now I'm just only more screwed. But maybe like I can just keep combining these fruit in such a way that like maybe this will not just be this barrier between two fruits that I wanted to combine. Maybe I will just transform it over time into the fruit that I want to combine and kind of save the day that way, but like there's always, everything is just always in your way. Like the play space is pretty cramped. Like you always, there's always something that's just like, I don't know, that I just couldn't foresee. And, it's been really challenging. But it's been really fun.
Imagine the other thing that you didn't mention here is imagine with Tetris, as you get good at it, and Dr. Mario and all the falling object games, as you get good at it, you gain space because you push down the stack, you clear out the shit. Yoshi's Cookie, columns, which is history, by the way, even kicks. Like you're clearing shit out. This one, you're actually creating a thing that is more unwieldy because each fruit is larger than the one previous, which means it's got more negative space around it, because if you put two like basketballs next to each other in a closed space, like they're going to interact with one another at the point where they touch, and they're going to create voids. Voids are the absolute enemy in this game. So when you get a watermelon, it's really difficult to get the second because now you've got this big fucking watermelon taking up space and blocking your ability to use large portions of the play area. So as you actually gain stuff, as you get further into the game, it naturally gets harder because you end up with less and less space to work in. So it doesn't need that like speed progression mechanic that all those other games have. It's like it self difficulty increases, and I don't even know if it's possible to get a third watermelon. Like I don't even know if they'd fit in the space.
Right, and so the game ends when the fruit reach the top of the play space. But there's it's more and more cramped in there. But also, again, as I said, there are physics at play here, and when two fruit combine, they might just boost, like catapult like the smaller fruit up, and like it's happened to me where like actually the play space, the field was actually pretty clear. Like it was not all that full, but like I combined two fruit that just combined in such a way like that it just shot up like this cherry to the top of the screen, and I died immediately. So you got to be careful about that. But like what you're hoping most of the time when you're combining fruit is like, oh, like I hope like it jostles something actually in just the right way, that these two fruit that seem so close to touching and that they're not, they refuse to, like maybe this will be the thing to kind of nudge them and get them to touch and give me a break here. There's nothing you want more as you play this game than an ability to just like shake the freaking game.
Oh yeah.
You just want to like jostle things and just like, come on, like just all those cherries that are like loose in the play area. Like come on, just drop down to the bottom, combine together and just get out of my freaking way. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a lot of fun. It's got this very repetitive but catchy music loop to it, and I feel like it's probably a mistake to listen to it because I'm sure at some point, like I'm not gonna be able to go to sleep or to be awake without having it play in my head forever. So I should probably start listening to podcasts as I'm playing this.
This game had a run with streamers about a month ago.
Right.
And it absolutely wrecked entire stream chats because the song would just play for like 3 hours straight.
Right.
And you just people in the chat going, like the game would start and they'd go, "Oh God, the song is back!"
Yeah.
Just absolute suffering.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's a very effective little puzzle game. It's a lot of fun. Like this is not the first of these to play with like physics and stuff like that. I just remember on the PlayStation 3, this Sony Studios, I think, Japan Studios game, Trash Panic, I think, where you were meant to. Maybe that's not the title, but anyway, like basically you were like dropping trash into this play area, and you were trying to use the physics to crush the stuff, to burn it, etc., in order to not fill up completely the play space.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. I'm just blanking on if that was its name.
It was not a... Yes, that's what it's called. Trash Panic. Okay. It was on PlayStation 3. It stayed on the PlayStation 3 as far as I can tell. So it was not a classic. It did not, catch fire. PSN was had less reach than XBLA back then. But yeah, so so this game, Suika game, not the first one to play with physics that way. To have this gameplay where you're trying to basically not crowd yourself too much. But this is much better.
We've talked about this a little bit on the show, I believe, but this game came out in Japan only on Switch, which is weird in and of itself. Like, there's no reason for it. The game is basically in English. Mm-hmm. In 2021, didn't come to any other region until it blew up with a bunch of VTubers in Japan and eventually made the jump to Western language ones. Mm-hmm. And then the company panicked and released it in the rest of the world 2 years later. And now it's a Nintendo featured game trial game, despite only costing $3.
Sure.
It's like they didn't give a shit about this game for 2 years, and suddenly, oh God, get it out. Somebody made a lot of deals really fast, and I am impressed. I'm impressed by that person. They staged an international release, and then they got it on game trials. Like, they fucking went to town as fast as they could. They apparently sold like 3 or 4 million units of this game now. Like, wow. They reported that recently. It's like, God, what a sudden like found treasure windfall because a bunch of fucking VTubers picked your game up.
Yeah. So you've got the week basically to play it for free if you are an NSO subscriber. It is also past that, as I said, like it's a browser game. I think they themselves got, probably stole the gameplay or from like a Chinese game, from what I'm seeing on the Wikipedia. The Chinese game was called I had it just
Merge Big Watermelon.
Merge Big Watermelon, yes. So, and there are already, countless clones of Suika game now.
Oh, yeah.
Just everywhere. But yeah, I think people should try it. It's a lot of fun.
It is really funny to have a game trials game for a game that is $3.
Yeah.
But also, Guillaume, I mean, are you going to be a VTuber now?
I was thinking about it.
I like it.
Now that you're a robot voice, maybe I can just be an anime girl. Why not?
We got to think of what your gimmick is. You can't just be an anime girl. You got to have a gimmick. You got to have something that makes you unique.
Yeah, it could be. What was it? Fuck me. Not Naughty Boy. The other one.
Naughty Boy. You could be the Naughty Boy VTuber.
Yeah, Frisky Gee. I'll be Frisky Gee. Sure.
Well, I mean, Switch has laxed their rules on content, so
Frisky Gee anti-game podcast.
It could be the Frisky Gee's time to shine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna write that one down too, just so we have it.
No, I want to just mention something very quick.
Yes.
Famous last words, because this could easily turn into a whole thing where everyone has something to say. But I just want to mention that there's something called these releases of PC-88 games on the Switch. The whole series so far, there are 3 games. They started with Thexter, which is a game I know about. I watched my brother play it in the 10D1000 back in the day.
Yeah, way back in the day. Yep.
And it had a very catchy song, and it was by Game Arts, or the studio that would become Game Arts.
Yeah, also kind of one of the first sort of mecha games that I ever saw in North America, specifically mecha games.
Yeah, so that's a thing, and now the latest release is XANADU from Falcom, our friends at Falcom. So that's a thing that exists, and if you're in the US, you can go ahead and buy one of these games for $6.50, which seems to me like a decent price. And XANADU seems to be, from the screenshots, translated. It seems to be in English. So why don't you go ahead and do it? I would go ahead and do it, but these games are not available in Canada.
What? Oh, it's one of these?
Yeah, I guess so. There's no equivalent page on the Canadian eShop, and if I try to buy it from the US site, I just get an error message. And I've never tried to download something from the US
you have
site
to have an
before.
account.
Probably, right? But also, do I need, is this a situation where just people who are importing Japanese games, you need to have a US eShop card to
maybe, but it's really easy to buy US eShop value off Amazon. Really easy.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go through that for PC-88 games.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, but someone play them and report back to me. I'll just live through vicariously.
I've been keeping an eye on them when I first noticed they were starting to pop up, and I'm like, what's going on here? Yeah. But none of the ones that have popped yet are ones that I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the breaking point for me.
Right. But yeah, no, it's cool. I'm happy to see it happen, but I wish it were, available in Canada, I suppose.
Oh, Canada. All right. Greg.
Yes. So, other than Super Mario RPG, which we already mentioned, I not too much else to talk about, I guess, because some of the time's been spent doing Seventh Guest, ready for the retroactive a bit later on. Also been chipping away at Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. I've been chipping away at that for quite a while before I started Super Mario RPG, but I did hit the point this week of finishing the campaign for the original Advance Wars. So, that's been pretty fun. It's a very straightforward kind of remake, a new presentation of those games, but they're still rock solid, excellent portable games. They always have been. And, you know, the new presentation, it doesn't add a great deal. It's kind of nice because they're, you know, kind of polygonal representations of the battlefield now rather than a pixel art thing, that it's just easy to use the sort of draw the right analog stick back just to get a broader view of the whole map, you know, on some of the larger ones and stuff. But pretty much just going to play. However, if you've played the Advance Wars before, it's just going to be how you remember it for the most part, really. But enjoyable nonetheless. And I'll probably get going on that second campaign. Fairly soon, I would have thought. And then, other than that, follow up a little bit on the Jet Force Gemini thing. Touched on that with the closing music last week, but yeah, that went up alongside 1080 Snowboarding and Harvest Moon in a rare 3-game N64 drop. That was kind of interesting in itself. I do want to spend some time with 1080, as I've mentioned before. That was one game that I didn't have originally, and also did not get on Wii Virtual Console, as I did, many of the N64 games that I missed out on back, originally with the high cost of importing. I caught up with a lot of them there, but not 1080, so that is something I'll be looking at for sure. But with Jet Force Gemini, actually John Redden just posted a video on the NWI YouTube channel covering what happened with the widescreen thing, why it's fine with the GoldenEye widescreen, but not with this. It's basically, it takes me back to the early days of having a DVD player, which of course, this game is contemporaneous, with that. The end of the 90s, the beginning of the 21st century, in that basically, the GoldenEye's widescreen mode is like an anamorphic widescreen DVD, and Jet Force Gemini's is like a non-anamorphic widescreen. In other words, the GoldenEye widescreen was designed to be stretched out, whereas, the Jet Force Gemini display was designed to be zoomed in. Instead, whereas the emulator for Switch Online is stretching it out, like as if, it's an anamorphic thing. So yeah, that's what happened there. But, I think more important than that, in terms of, the experience, if you do want to give Jet Force Gemini a go, is the fact that this is one of the cases where not having the kind of customizable buttons is more of an issue than it has been with other N64 games, I would say. Although, there's still the system level stuff you can do with button remapping. So presumably, there's something there that could help. But the point is this, with the face buttons on the right side of, the right Joy-Con, or the right side of the system, the right controller, whatever you've got, they're sort of mapped to B and A, being B and A, as corresponding exactly from N64 to the Switch, and then 2 of the C buttons, right? And then if you want to have access sort of the other C buttons, you've got the option of the analog stick most of the time, not in every game, but most of the time, it can be the 4 different directions of the C buttons. Or you could sort of toggle things by holding down the back right shoulder ZR, and then the 4 face buttons, while that's being held down, become the 4 C buttons, right? The correct directions for that. Problem is that there's not really a good sort of compromise with Jet Force Gemini, the way its control scheme works, because B and A in Jet Force Gemini are weirdly not that sort of critical. Like, mostly what they do is just scroll through your weapons. That's it. Right, and you have certain contextual actions like opening a weapon like case or something. They're not particularly important. The C buttons are far, far more important, right? Because you've got sort of 2 modes of moving around. You've got your kind of just like running and gunning, And then you could, alternatively, when you press R, a little bit like GoldenEye, even though I don't think this was particularly the group at Rare that made GoldenEye. I think it was more the people that were making Blast Core while GoldenEye was being made. But, when you hold down the right shoulder button, in GoldenEye, you go into that kind of mode where the reticle comes up and you can aim more precisely. In Jet Force Gemini, that's where you kind of actually go sort of behind the shoulder. The character goes transparent, and now you're aiming more precisely, and you can actually sort of strafe with the C buttons and all this kind of thing. So in either mode, the C buttons are really important, right? Because if you're running and gunning there and it's not behind the shoulder, then you use the up C button to jump. And it has a non-trivial platform component to this. It's kind of, a lot of it is like a proto third-person shooter, but it has, as I guess, was a lot of what Rare was doing at this time was kind of 3D platformers. It has quite a bit of that in there as well. So, it's really important to be able to sort of hit that top C button to jump. And not a particularly good substitute to flick the right stick upwards either. So there's that, but then also, like I said, it is really important for certain, because there's certain enemies which are all right to kind of tackle running and gunning, right? The simple grunts, you don't need necessarily, especially if you've got some of the weapons that, have got more of a sort of spray on there, kind of firing. You don't need to particularly aim precisely. So you could just kind of run around them and kind of just, there's a certain amount of auto aim going on, it'll kill them. But there's a lot of enemies as well that are very specifically designed to get you to press that right shoulder button, go into the aiming mode and target them. So first you get snipers that'll be up in, kind of positions at the top of trees and buildings and stuff that your regular kind of general, shoot roughly where you're facing it are not going to get. And then the other thing is they have this habit of bringing in, formations of enemies, almost like it's Gallagher or something all of a sudden, just a bunch of enemies, aerial enemies come in a formation, and the whole point is you're supposed to, press the R button and take them out with precision aiming. Now, like I said, the thing about this that presents problems is that if you are, kind of wanting to move your character while you're aiming in this way, you've got to do that with the C buttons. And again, it's not really a great substitute to do that with the stick either. So what you're really talking about at this point is you've got to hold down the front R button, and then also hold down the ZR button to sort of toggle it so that your face buttons become the C buttons, and do it that way. And that is like a claw type of thing. This reminds me of what people used to talk about playing Monster Hunter on PSP was like, which I never actually did, so I can't comment on how accurate that is, but it makes it so it's like I've got two shoulder buttons, kind of held down with my fingers. I'm using the face buttons on the Switch kind of like a D-pad as I'm trying to sort of strafe at Obviously, it had limitations at the time. They were, kind of trying to do something that really was a bit beyond what the N64 controller was offering them. You kind of needed that second stick, but, there was no second stick controller with the N64. So, it was using those C buttons, and it just, it had its issues originally, but playing it like this, it makes it actually a bit worse. It's just really regrettable that they don't have any kind of options the way that they, say for instance, did on Wii U Virtual Console for, changing button mappings and all that, because it'd be very easy to say, let's just kick B and A off to something else, because they, like I said, you don't need them to be like primary action buttons. They're just to cycle through weapons. But you don't have that, so yeah, I would assume, to some extent, obviously, it's a faithful experience if you've got one of those N64 controllers to do it that way. But, that does sort of come in and out of being in stock of like the My Nintendo still over here, certainly. I don't know how it kind of fares elsewhere, but yeah, it's not like you can't get them, but it's not necessarily always available either, over here from what I've seen. But obviously the problem with that is that, I think the real allure of this at all, especially for me being someone who owns an Xbox and Rare Replay, is that it's portable, Force Gemini. And of course, if you're doing it, with a controller, then you're either talking about doing it on the TV or in tabletop, which I've used tabletop a lot more since I got the OLED Switch, because the stand is actually like half decent rather than that original stand, which was very woeful. But still, like I said, for me, played a lot. If I was going to play more Jet Force Gemini, I think like the full portability would have to work better than it does here, because it's just not ideal doing this claw thing to kind of move properly while shooting with the aiming sights on. So yeah, a bit of a shame. It's one of the more extreme cases, this, exposing the limitations of the way that they've got things set up with the NSO apps not having customizable button mappings. But there's various ways of getting around it. And again, I didn't play all the way through it or anything on Rare Replay, but what they did with that, where it's like, okay, now we have two sticks, so we can at least make it. They don't redesign the game or anything, so it doesn't address some of the more fundamental issues. But just having a controller with a second stick handle that kind of aim, moving and while aiming. But it definitely is, if you have access to that, that's the way to play this, to try this game today is through Rare Replay, because that will be, it's probably, obviously it's going to be higher res and, I don't know, maybe the frame rate is just from playing it here, I feel like the frame rate's somewhat better than it was, originally, because, it did drop pretty low. It likes to do like explosions and loads of bug body parts, like, tumbling in the air and stuff. And it didn't really agree with the N64 as I recall. So while, the frame rate's far from buttery smooth here, I have to think it's probably a little bit better. It's similar to GoldenEye in that respect. But, I would again think Rare Replay is, the way to go in terms of control comfort and, performance and all that. So yeah, a little bit of a shame in that sense, but obviously, like I said, some of these things are just the way, it was, trying to be, like I say, it doesn't quite know exactly what it's, how much of a platformer it wants to be, how much of a, this kind of nascent third person shooter it wants to be. But obviously the genre, doesn't really get sort of popularized until after RE4, which is, like 6 years younger than Jet Force Gemini. 5 and a bit. So yeah, it's really early for this kind of game. It had not been nailed down yet. So, some, and just, the limitations of the N64, that is kind of the way that it is. But it's interesting. It'd be kind of nice for more people to kind of see it and, give it a go and see what, Rare were trying to do. Because it does feel like it's one of the games, because a certain amount of Rare's output in that time was just like, make a game like what Nintendo has already made to kind of like plug the schedule. Like, Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing, it's very much just like, Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart, they already exist and people like them and they probably like something more like them, and this is Rare sort of doing their version of it. Whereas Jet Force Gemini was more like, well, this is not something that Nintendo would make right now. And, it felt more like, kind of boundary pushing and kind of, interesting, innovative in a way. So I think it's kind of nice that is available for people to kind of have a look at, here. But, it's not the best either. So I'm still hoping more for Blast Corps to come back. That would be better. I think it worked better as a portable game and it doesn't have, so many of those control issues because it's just not as kind of mechanically complex. And I wouldn't mind seeing Diddy Kong Racing come back as well, actually, because it's been absolutely ages since I played that, and probably because I never had the DS version, for instance. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how well that holds up or not these days. But you got to think there's something interesting going on here, just with this whole, as I mentioned briefly before, in Japan they've got a separate higher age rated app to have GoldenEye and Jet Force Gemini and GoldenEye on that app. So it's like, okay, so that's kind of, is it just for those, or, how many more such games could, does it suggest Conker could be coming? But what's more interesting than that to me is the fact that I think apparently the app, the sort of analogous app, has been rated for Australia. Where, I don't think Australia would have rated Force Gemini that highly in the first place, or GoldenEye. So that I know Australia has quite an interesting history with its video games ratings.
Well, yeah, they just wouldn't give adult, essentially.
Yeah. So, but that does suggest, like, okay, is there something more to this? Or we get something that's less obvious in the mix here? Because it was already kind of weird with Jet Force Gemini. Although, having just glanced at that Japanese version, I will say this as well. It seems like it was slightly modified in that the bug, like dismemberment, just doesn't happen as much. Like, I don't see again, these small sample size, so, this is hardly robust sort of evidence.
It was very splatty on the N64.
Yeah, like I said, there's heads are coming off, and like you collect the heads as like it is a collectible. Just in the little bit I messed around with it on the Japanese 18 plus app, it has. The heads just weren't coming off the way I remembered. And then, it came to when it released a week later or whatever it was, for the Western territories. Again, all of a sudden, the heads are coming off, all this sort of stuff. So, it's weird to me that it was seemingly quite highly rated in Japan, even after they toned it down. And, like I said, you got a cartoon dog shooting bugs. It seems strange to me, but there you go. So, I'd be interested to see where they go now, because basically this is it, isn't it? With the 3 games, they've fulfilled all the sort of obligations that they'd made for themselves with previous trailer, and in fact, slightly exceeded them by actually having GoldenEye and Jet Force Gemini, which were not kind of explicitly committed to until they were coming out. So, if they're going to keep putting N64 games on there, they're going to sort of find. I mean, there's a few obvious things you can think of, like original Smash Brothers and whatnot, but they're going to have to find maybe some less obvious candidates if they want to keep at it. Although it must be said, the GBA stuff has been really, really slow, hasn't it?
Oh my god! I forgot it was a service for a while.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Again, they don't have that many games. I think that they're actually they've already directly committed to with left. Like, I think Golden Sun, when we talked about this with the closing music as well, that is one of them, and there might be, I think, one other perhaps. But they haven't committed to that many. But think of all the ones that they might not have had in a trailer yet. But it's like Metroid Zero Mission, or like all these games. It seems weird to me how the slow GBA has been, but again, we just assume they're really, really spacing it out. So I imagine we'll see more GBA. They're probably going to be a Nintendo Direct in February, and we'll get some sort of outline sketch for us of the GBA games to expect in 24 to kind of keep us going. But I imagine we'll have any questions answered then. But for now, I just probably have to get on with 1080 a little bit and see if that holds up at all. Hopefully it's like less technical than Excitebike, because I still struggle to get into that.
Yeah, I played a lot of 1080, but I don't remember the answer to that question.
I mean, I don't remember 1080s being particularly complex.
No.
Certainly not like something like some of the EA big, like SSX or something like that.
Of course, it came out earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list of GBA games. It's pretty dire. Nintendo, what the fuck? What the fuck? All right. Well, anything else, Greg?
No, that'll do it for me for now. Like I said, not the most going on with getting ready for Seventh Guest, but like I said, hopefully maybe pick a few things off my my sort of list before we do the the end of the year kind of games, which won't be far along now, so I'll have to get down to business.
All right. Well, on that, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll do a little bit of listener mail, so please stay tuned. We are back with a little taste of listener mail. You can send your emails to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. John, you said you'd read this email for us?
Yes. Juan writes, "Hello, RFN crew. After listening to our cherished Quebecois disenchanting experience with Castlevania Symphony of the Night and the lack of the ending song I Am the Wind, I looked for the answer of this dilemma, and according to the Castlevania fandom wiki, it seems that the XBLA used to have the XBLA version of the game. Used to have the song until an update removed it and changed it with Admiration Towards the Clan from Lament of Innocence. For reference, I Am the Wind appeared in all endings, good or bad, of the original PS1 and Sega Saturn versions. It is believed that the removal was due to a copyright issue caused by Cynthia Harrell becoming a signed artist. I'm not sure that's the whole story because Harrell also performed Snake Eater for Metal Gear Solid 3, which, as you know, was just recently re-released in the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, and the song will also be used in the upcoming remake, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, so I'm guessing Konami just didn't bother to renew the license for Symphony of the Night. And if I remember correctly, the ending song of MGS3, Way to Fall, had a licensing renewal issue as well that made it impossible to purchase a 3DS digital version towards the end of the eShop service. By the way, I Am the Wind was released as a mini CD single in Japan. Anyway, seeing how this was an unexpected, unwanted update for Symphony of the Night, I was thinking, what do you all consider to be some of the worst updates to video games that removed content or changed things in such a way that made a game worse for it? Besides this one, I did not like how Ocarina of Time in later N64 revisions removed the red color of Ganondorf's blood, and I did not like the chorus that they used to replace the Muslim one or the removal of the crescent and star symbol. With automatic online updates, I'd imagine there are now many such examples.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that there are a lot of examples from, games that can be patched afterwards, but the examples that I'm thinking of don't really match that specific case, and it's more things like Tales of Symphonia, which just keeps getting worse and worse every time that it's re-released because it's amazing. It's amazing, yes. Like the original was like 60 frames per second. It was, it looked good at the time, and each port seems to have more and more issues because I think they're all based on the PlayStation 2 port that was, like lower frame rate. And they just never seem to bother to go back to that GameCube code, or so it's always a compromised version that we get in all these re-releases. Yeah, it feels more and more compromised as time goes on, which is the funny part. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're also seeing games where especially with music too, that he brings that up, where you're seeing there's been other games too where licensing deals have just ran out. And so, like, I think, wasn't it the original Alan Wake, I think, had to be pulled off? They pulled it off the Xbox store just because they ran out, some licensing deal expired or something like that, and they couldn't sell it anymore until they renewed it. You're seeing a lot of that licensing kind of stuff come up, so it makes me wonder about, stuff like the older Grand Theft Auto titles and stuff like that, where they're heavily licensing music. Right. And if you might see more of that going forward. Because that's something that you don't really think about. It sounds like a great idea at the time to license music like that. It's kind of especially with something like GTA, where it's like that's one of the key pillars of that game, the appeal of it, right? But it's also very expensive because you have to keep those licensing deals going effectively into perpetuity.
Yeah, I guess especially like back then as well, like, earlier, in the aughts, or especially if you're talking about before the turn of the century, I don't know how much consideration was given to the idea of like, well, we might want to keep selling this. It was very much just like, well, no, I mean, you bring it out, it sells however much it's going to sell pretty quickly, and that's it. So if you did license stuff, you probably thought, oh, we'll only sort of have the contingencies will only cover, a relatively brief period of time, and you're not thinking about it being at that stage available on a digital storefront beyond the life of, however many physical copies have been produced and are just, kind of being recycled around, physical stores. So yeah, obviously today it's a much different world. You would hope at least that even if people, you do get situations where, like there's a situation where it's conceivable, this license might expire and we may therefore not renew it because it might not be economic at that point, that at least you've considered that ahead of time, and it's kind of like it can sort of still work without it. There's some sort of contingency or something in place for if or when that happens, because you actually consider the fact that, these days, console generations are longer, games, are more so being sold beyond the end of one console generation, like I said, the digital part of it, all this stuff. I mean, look at you're talking about GTA. I mean, look at the life of GTA 5. It's a game that's continued to be, very much alive, continues to sell, continues to, especially beyond selling copies, generate revenue, more than 10 years after it came out. It's a different, kind of consideration at this point. But, obviously these sorts of things are still going to happen. But a lot of the time I think of things like with, like people, there'd be like exploits in games that people like. Yeah. And, they might get, obviously, in the days of before patches, a lot of the time those exploits would just stand and that was it. You know what I mean? Like, there was nothing that anybody was going to do. But, as was mentioned with Ocarina of Time, which was a cartridge game, especially if a game was kind of popular and it was going to get sort of reruns, more sort of, productions of the physical cartridge or disc, they would fix things. They'd fix bugs that had been found. I think, wasn't there like a pretty major exploit with Metroid Prime to do with scanning that let people like do like speedrun stuff that subsequent pressings of the disc like didn't let you do? And I think Super Smash Brothers Melee, like the very first run of Melee, like let you do stuff with like an action replay with like having like 8 players on screen or something, or 6 maybe it was, like that you couldn't do when they did the subsequent pressings of that, because again they just squashed some of those exploits. So you have some exploit stuff I guess that people like, but most of the time, like for me, I think of exploits being patched as just so much better. Like Mario Kart 7's online was just utterly miserable when you had that exploit on one of the Woohoo tracks where, like people just kept picking that track because it's like, oh, I could do this exploit that means I'd like skip half the damn track or whatever. And it's like, oh. And he'd just keep coming up and he'd keep winning. Oh, please. And I mean, they did update that eventually, and I was very glad. So, that's probably what sticks out in my mind more than the egregious kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's interesting stuff too. I'm just looking at this one. I was just kind of trying to see, I just did a search to see kind of what game issues have come up, but this is an interesting one. Speaking of GTA, is with GTA, the trilogy, there was a character, an arms dealer, that in the original game had a Confederate flag on his jacket, and when they re-released the trilogy, they removed that flag. So you see stuff like that too, right? It's just
right. It's just or games that come out in Japan and then they come out much later in North America and they've removed vagina bones. That's something that we've seen.
Yes, or made. It's like there's some games too where like in one region the boobs are huge and then in another region they're smaller or something like that, like silly stuff like that. But yeah,
censorship.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, I feel like it's overblown. Like, if it was never there to begin with, like, for example, in this example I'm citing here, if that character, they changed it to a skull icon. If that character was never wearing a Confederate flag, nobody would have ever cared, right? And it's like,
it's something that would have to be done with I was talking about hoping Blast Corps comes to, the NSO eventually. That would have to be done for that, because they had a bunch of little cars in that were references to old TV shows like the A-Team van and stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of them was the General Lee from the Dukes of Hazzard with the battle flag on top of it. So that would have to go. I presumably already did in Rare Replay. I don't recall this exactly, but I would imagine it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable, right? I mean, times change.
No. I mean, the Ocarina examples are kind of interesting because, that I had an original pressing, right? So I had Ganondorf coughing up blood when he's seemingly dying, although, of course, he does not stay dead. But obviously, like the green vomit instead, it looks kind of dopey, but that was just something that was so standard back then. I mean, a lot of the time it was not so much like a later pressing, but rather like a Japan to the West thing. Like Super Castlevania 4, there's that dungeon level in it where it's just blood everywhere in the Japanese version, rivers of blood and all that. And of course, the Western version is all green slime. But with Ocarina, the other thing that did change was the Gerudo symbol was a crescent moon. Basically, and I guess, that was, especially with the chanting part. Now that I think was a pretty innocent mistake on Nintendo's part in terms of apparently it was part of like a sound library that like a bunch of games in the mid to late 90s just like liberally used from. Yes. So they probably genuinely just had no idea that sound library had used, something that had Muslim sort of chanting vocals in it. And then they put that, I think that was in the Fire Temple originally, but then simultaneously they'd used a bunch of kind of Muslim type imagery for the Gerudo of people who live in the desert. And I think the combination of the two just maybe made it seem really culturally insensitive.
It's a little too on the nose.
So it's like, okay, no, let's take all of that out. And the Gerudo have a different symbol in the subsequent runs, which, then persists into, the subsequent portrayals of that kind of, the nation or race of people, however they're kind of presented in subsequent games. I mean, it's perfectly sensible changes in that case. Like, so, the red blood, green blood thing, I guess was, but I don't know whether maybe that's something the rated people missed originally, and maybe they kind of said, oh, well, whatever rated Ocarina would have got in certain territories, like the red blood was not something that was welcomed, and it kind of just fit better that way. But that part of it I could see kind of not being that, it kind of diminishing a bit, because like I say, it just looks a bit silly when I've seen the video of the green vomit. But the rest of it, I wouldn't find fault with at all.
I'll be honest, I'm struggling to come up with something that really meets the criteria of the question. Like the weird thing here is, I would have expected this to be a major issue in something like Smash Ultimate, where there's so much content that is ultimately licensed, pun not intended, that you would think that at some point this would have come up. But the only thing I could think of in Ultimate that got patched, I believe it was in Ultimate, was the Game & Watch thing, where he originally was from his fire attack, where it was originally from a game where he had a feather because it was like prevent Indians from burning down the fort was the original game it came from. But like, I can't think of anything else. Like, it feels like that's the game that, if we're talking from a Nintendo context purely, would have been the one where it happened. But I got nothing.
Right. Yeah. Well, like it's happened in several N64 games, or at least in one game. The Kawasaki license was taken out of Wave Race, right?
Right.
When it came to Virtual Console and subsequent releases.
I was kind of surprised, actually. I didn't play it much, as I've already mentioned, but I did boot up 1080 Snowboarding, and it's got like the Tommy Hilfiger license up front on there or something.
Okay.
Wow.
I was going to say, what if they actually like renewed that? Because I would have thought that would be like Kawasaki or some of these other ones where it's like, okay, that's got to go, hasn't it? Any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, these days it was probably pretty cheap to renew that if they did renew it.
Yeah,
Tommy Hill, not exactly the hottest brand right now.
Not soaring to its old heights.
It's Method Man stopped wearing it quite a while ago. So,
speaking of not soaring at their original heights.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think, a lot more now. I think remasters are more interesting because you see this stuff get revisited. But yeah, I mean, I don't really, I would think that this would be a bigger issue than it really is. But I think also these days, companies really don't want to invite any sort of unwanted attention to changes like this most of the time, unless they feel like it's really justified. So they don't just go doing it willy-nilly, right? It's with something that is egregious, actually. If they make a change like this, it's, for a very good reason.
It's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a remaster case, too. I mean, I think what, rather than like, oh, the game's getting remastered and we've cut X, Y, and Z, I think what we're actually just getting is we're just not getting that game. Mm-hmm. So you can think of something like the original Crazy Taxi, the one people actually want. It's like, no, we're not. There's a joke there. It's not. We're not getting it because, in part, of that, the music.
Yeah.
Like, that game was not getting remastered because 20 years ago, somebody at Sega said, you know what goes with Taxi? The Offspring. You know what? They were right. But nobody's re-upped that license, I bet. And nobody wants to re-up that license.
That's why you're not seeing Rock Band and Guitar Hero revisited.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the reason that we took a long time to get a good Tony Hawk remaster.
Yeah.
That they did go do the work on that one, but they probably felt like they had a good shot at making that money back.
Yeah.
But it hits things like racing games. Like, there's no reason why I can't buy Forza Horizon 3 right now and go buy all the weird DLC content that it had, except that Microsoft had a license terms with those cars and that music. I think is 4 off the service now, or is that still hanging on?
Yeah, 4 is still on there. Yeah.
Okay, but it will have its moment too, where it sets into the horizon, and then 5 will be the only one left. Yeah. I dropped a couple of those.
Yeah, well, I have. It's not perfect for these sorts of criteria, but it's something that's a little bit similar. I'd say would be, and it's something that has actually been kind of remedied now. You think of for a long time the kind of version of a particular game that survived was one that had, it wasn't entirely things that were by choice. It was just, what they could achieve on the particular system. But the GBA version of Yoshi's Island was kind of the surviving version for a long time because they did not have Super FX games on Virtual Console. And so you kind of had to wait until you had like the Super Nintendo Mini and then SO for, the original Yoshi's Island FX chip, the Super Nintendo version to kind of come back and be kind of the version of record again. And, that the GBA version, is mostly kind of admirable take on it, but obviously it isn't perfect, because the resolution isn't as high, so you've got a lot less visible play area, in a game that kind of demands it, with the whole like making the shots with your eggs and trying to find all these collectibles and stuff. Like it matters, but then you've got some other aspects like the whole like having it be like the Yoshi Story onwards voice effects instead of the Mario World era, kind of Yoshi noises. So, I think there's probably I'm not as averse to that as some people, but, you could extend it to the other Super Mario Advance games. A lot of people really didn't like those voices and felt they were overused. And for a time, they were kind of some of the more kind of prominent versions of those games. Although, like I said, that the difference being with something like a Super Mario 3 or Super Mario World, at least you had Virtual Console for the sort of the quote unquote real versions of those games at a time where you didn't for Yoshi's Island. But obviously that's just a function of the fact that GBA wasn't kind of perfectly kind of capable of recreating it, and just the fact that that's the way they were characterizing Yoshi at that time. Although it does bring me to something I was a little bit surprised, I have to say, that they gave Yoshi those Yoshi Story vocalizations in the Super Mario RPG remake. I thought that was a surprise because it's so like Super Mario World, that game. Considering it's quite a few years after Super Mario World came out, the sound effects are very much like just lifted from, that kind of like popping noise when you do the spin jump on enemies in Super Mario World. Like, that's an enemy dying in Super Mario RPG. And many, many other sound effects are just like, if they're not literally the same sound effect, it's, you know, a close recreation. And of course, the remake on Switch is really, really faithful to that in so many ways. But they give Bowser some vocalizations that he wouldn't have had on Super Nintendo, which, you know, they seem natural enough. But for some reason, the sort of, the baby talking Yoshi noises in the remake, it's just, nah, that's not, you know, it should be the older, weird sort of noises that he had. But, you know, it's, I get, so some people maybe will feel that falls into a similar category. But again, I wouldn't say it's a big deal by any means.
Yeah. I really wish I had a better answer for this one, but I can't.
Yeah, because I get the feeling that if I revisited a game where they changed something, I wouldn't even notice for the most part. You know, because it's been too long. It probably isn't a game that I played extensively enough to actually know by heart and know exactly, like, oh, they changed this. Like, how come this is different? Or, like, maybe I'd have, like, a feeling, like, oh, this is not, like, the way I remember it, but I would blame that on my memory, not on the, you know, some sort of update.
Well, and it's not been but so long that Nintendo games get updates. Like, as
Right.
kind of frustrating as that probably was towards the end of that time. You know, we're talking about Wii U era and 3DS era.
3DS, Mario Kart 7 was one of the earlier kind of major examples of them actually patching. So even though obviously you could track back to like Mario Kart DS and think, bloody, I would have loved it if they had patched out Snaking, but they couldn't, they didn't. You know, but I suppose localization is something that for some people would kind of venture into this category where, you know, games were originally localized for the American market, you know, under more sort of strict limitations in terms of how long they had to do it or how much cartridge space they had to play with and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, the localizations that they produced, you know, might have been, you know, kind of very different than if they hadn't had those constraints. But then that becomes the version that people remember, right? And then a game's re-released later and there's a new localization. Oh, this is more faithful to what the text actually was, or, you know, it doesn't have those limitations that we had before. But then people who remembered that original one might still find it sort of unsatisfactory because it isn't, you know, what they actually played originally. So I think there's a few Square games that fall into this category, like Chrono Trigger, I think is definitely where you've got the Wolsey version and then you've got the, you know, kind of the Chrono Trigger DS version, where again, in many respects, I'm sure it's more cogent at times and you know, more accurate certainly, but maybe for some people it loses some of that charm, you know, and sort of just the specificity of the way it actually was at the time. But yeah, there's I remember even me, who didn't have the most like precise memory of the Super Nintendo Chrono Trigger when I played the DS version, just some of the terminology, like referring to Magus as like the Fiend Lord or whatever. It was like, I don't remember him being referred to this in the Super Nintendo game and stuff. But I mean, again, you know, for me, I wouldn't say it particularly diminished the experience, but there have to be people who feel that way. There just must be.
Can I give you a weird example that's not about games, but it's kind of relevant to how this topic was brought up, because it is about my, as a cherished Quebecois, you know, like it's based on my experience with translation in games and movies. But when they first released the original, like 1978 or 79 Superman movie on DVD, it was a special edition where, or a director's cut, where they added some footage. And as a kid, like, I watched Superman so much. Like, it was one of my favorite movies. And so I eagerly bought the DVD, and I never really experienced the movie in English, and my nostalgia was based on the French dub. So I went and tried to watch it in French, and it was like a different actor. It was a new dub because the movie contained scenes that didn't exist in the original, so they had to redub the whole thing. And that kind of completely destroyed my nostalgia for it, basically. I was like, what the hell's, like it didn't feel like the movie that I watched, so much as a kid. And so I kind of lost interest in it pretty quickly. Also, the director's cut was not very good. So there's also that. But anyway, so that's, I don't know. So that might be interesting.
I did think of one, and it took me a while of just racking my brain, but I landed on it. And if you remember on the Wii, which is now a long time ago, there was an update to the photo channel that gave you some stuff. But the big thing is that it took away the ability to play MP3s because Nintendo didn't want to pay that MP3 license. And that had a bang-on effect that it took away custom soundtracks in Excite Truck. So Excite Truck lets you actually load MP3s from your SD card so you didn't have to listen to its fucking awful soundtrack. Mm-hmm. Because even they knew it was garbage.
Speaking of Forza Horizon 3, they also removed the ability to do that in Forza Horizon 3 as well. Because remember how it used to have? It used to be. They used to integrate with Microsoft Groove, Microsoft's failed attempt at a Spotify clone. You used to be able to have MP3s, and also another thing I just thought of that you made me think of, James, was with the original PlayStation 3 when they removed the ability to install Linux on it.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that?
Yeah, they had a lawsuit settled about that.
Yeah.
I don't think that the photo update for the eShop or the photo app was actually affected Monster Excite Truck.
I seem to recall it impacted the Excite Truck's ability to play custom soundtracks.
Because I played Excite Truck very late, and I mentioned, I talked about it on the podcast, and, Johnny was in the show, and, like, I talked about how, like, it just took the first files that I had alphabetically on my computer and put them on an SD card, and so that was like some Amy Man playing when I was playing Excite Truck, and Johnny made a reference to the movie Magnolia, which I flew over my head, and anyway, like this whole thing happened.
So the thing is, you had to go into the photo channel and manually say I want to update. So if you never did that, you're probably fine.
Okay.
I never did that, so I could.
Yeah, I can't. The problem is, I played Excite Truck. I didn't play I didn't get it immediately, but it was like a few months after it came out or something that I got Excite Truck, and I played it a fair bit, but that was it. I don't think I really went back to it. I'm trying to remember if Excite Bots had the same sort of thing, but for AAC files, because that's what right. Kind of that was the switch they made, right? Rather than the MP3 licenses, like you could have AAC files on there instead.
Yeah,
but obviously, as we know, because they weren't patching anything, there wouldn't have been a patch for Excite Truck to use AAC because there weren't any.
Yeah, I feel like that was how it went down because Nintendo just didn't want to pay the MP3 license. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely happened. I remember the update to the photo channel for sure.
It's not dissimilar from the reason why you had to buy controllers to play DVDs on some consoles, even though you could easily just use your regular controller. It was because the DVD license at the time was paid as a portion of the price of the good. And originally they're thinking there was the DVD player you'll pay it for, but they didn't want to make that a portion of the price of a console, so they took out the DVD functionality and instead gave it to you when you bought the remote, so that was the portion of the price that they paid for the DVD license.
Or in the case of the Wii, it just didn't bother in any form. It could have played DVDs, like there's homebrew to make it play DVDs, but they just never did.
We're not dealing with that. No, that's money. Yeah, it feels like almost all of these come down to there's a license I find onerous and I no longer wish to pay it, or I do not wish to pay it.
Yeah.
And therefore, I will just take the thing out and make my product worse.
Yeah, or making a product worse, but, shutting off the online service and then basically patching in a message that says, womp, sorry, no online service.
Yeah, I no longer wish to pay for servers, therefore I shall not.
Yep.
Nintendo, broadly speaking, has been pretty good about that, except for their games that were the free games with Nintendo Switch Online. Which, of course, they've knocked a bunch of those offline since they've launched. I mean, there's possibly one of the favorite images I ever made for a news article of Pac-Man burning all the Marios, because we replaced Mario 99 with Pac-Man whatever, or Mario 35 or whatever it was with Pac-Man 99.
35, yeah, because that was the anniversary. Big anniversary 35. We all know that. Those of us who are the wrong side of that age.
I think now we're all the wrong side of that age.
We are. Yeah. So we know how big it is. We've lived it, obviously.
I was the last holdout, and now no, not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just Nintendo hasn't quite been as bad about that as some of their colleagues, which is good, but it makes this question harder to answer. Anybody else got anything?
No.
I can't think of anything else.
Okay. All right.
It's a tough question. Again, I have no memory at all, so...
Yeah,
it's probably easier to say with films, because there was that period sort of after the Star Wars special editions where a bunch of films like Guillaume already mentioned with the Superman and stuff like that. There was like E.T. in the bath and all that. There was this little moment where it's like people say, let's add stuff to films,
Yeah.
Right. That people do generally, I would imagine a lot of people just did not want. Right. So, yeah, that's probably a little bit easier with that than
guns were removed in E.T. in favor of walkie-talkies or something.
Giant walkie-talkies.
Yeah. Being held like no one has ever held a walkie-talkie in their life.
Well, you have to wave them menacingly so people stop at your checkpoint.
Yes. But yeah,
all
that's
right. Okay, well, all right. That is going to do it for a short email segment this week. You can send your emails to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That is rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. This is where I would tease about the seventh guest, but there's a pretty good chance we'll have recorded this at some point in the near future. So, get him in, I guess, but we may have already recorded the episode, so we'll figure it out. So, Greg, what is our music to wrap up the show this week?
Well, we have, to coincide with the release of the second portion of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Indigo Disc, I believe it's called, I'm honouring another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet music request. This is actually the fourth one in 13 months or whatever.
Oh, God.
I have originally this email, this is from BSK. He requested it in September, relative to, a kind of event that was going on within Pokemon Scarlet and Violet at that time. So I am sorry that it doesn't have the timeliness that perhaps it was requested, with that in mind. But I had to space them out a bit, because we've had more than I've used as well. It certainly seems like whatever, regrets or criticisms there might be about, especially the technical aspects of Scarlet and Violet and all that. The people love the soundtrack because it certainly, we've had a lot of requests for it, and the stuff that we've used I think is very good. This one is the sort of Terror Raid battle theme, and I believe it's another one of Toby Fox's contributions to the soundtrack, the creator of Undertale, who again, I think at least one of the previous three that we have used could be attributed to him. But yeah, just full of energy, a really enjoyable battle theme. As Pokemon already long before Toby Fox had any involvement with the soundtrack, it's pretty well noted for having very memorable, kind of RPG battle music, and so it fits in that tradition. But I think it's got some of that its own flavour to it as well.
Cool. All right. Well, on that, it is time for us to go. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.